Hello and welcome back to Pop Culture Graveyard. I am Hollis, and this week I'm going to bring back my most played. These are the albums I've been listening to an awful lot lately, and they happen to be soundtracks. I believe that a great soundtrack not only enhances the film, but also stands on its own as a great record. So please join me for some soundtracks as cool as the movies they come from. My most played soundtrack edition. No more air quotes, I promise. Damn it. If you're enjoying the content I'm bringing you from week to week and would like access to uncut, commercial-free episodes, please consider joining my Patreon at patreon.com/popculturegraveyard. And thanks. First up, Harold and Maude. This is one of my all-time favorite films, written by the great Colin Higgins, directed by the great Hal Ashby, and featuring an awful lot of songs from the great Cat Stevens. Such an amazing soundtrack that not only enhances the movie, but stands on its own as a fantastic statement. This is the 50th anniversary pressing on 180-gram vinyl that came out this year, put out by Island Records through Universal. And if you're going to own this soundtrack on vinyl, this is the way to do it. There was a Harold and Maude record put out in 1972 on A&M Records, but it omitted several soundtrack songs in favor of a selection of popular songs that weren't in the film at all. Likewise, the comp Footsteps in the Dark in 1984 had some of the Harold and Maude songs, but it was really an all-encompassing compilation for the years 1972 through 1978. So there wasn't a proper Harold and Maude soundtrack until 2007. But for my money, this 50th anniversary pressing is definitive. It's just the right mixture of professional and playful. And one of the big reasons is the attention to detail. Check out the labels, with one side having a daisy and the other side having a sunflower, as both flowers are featured prominently in the film. The attention to detail even extends into the dead wax, where the side A matrix says, "Don't wear fear or nobody will know you're there." And the side B matrix reads, "There's a million things to be," each of which are culled from wonderful Cat Stevens lyrics in the film. This pressing even comes with a beautiful booklet, the front and back cover of which are mixtures of daisies and sunflowers. And inside the booklet, you'll find a wonderful treasure trove of photos, as well as promotional artwork, Cat Stevens lyrics, an interview with Cat Stevens, whose music is the sonic wallpaper for this amazing film, as well as a full list of every Cat Stevens lyric and snippet of dialogue on the record. If you are unfamiliar with Harold and Maude, Cat Stevens' music is like another character in the film. And once you see the film, it will be impossible to imagine the movie without Cat Stevens' music. Between the Cat Stevens songs, the incidental music, and the snippets of dialogue from the film itself, this soundtrack really makes you feel like you're experiencing the film. And with a film this beautiful, that's a great thing. Up next, Married to the Mob. Wait, don't click away. I know it seems like we downshifted from a cinema classic to a throwaway Michelle Pfeiffer vehicle. And we kinda did, but we're talking soundtracks. And Jonathan Demme, the director of this film, has fantastic taste in music. This soundtrack album features Sinead O'Connor, the Feelies, Brian Eno, Ziggy Marley and the Melody Makers, Debbie Harry performing Liar Liar, the great Castaways song, Chris Isaak, and the Tom Tom Club. That is a very fun, eclectic mix, and it really works here as a sort of jumbled up playlist. The main calling card for this soundtrack, and the reason I bought it in the first place, is because it features Goodbye Horses by Q Lazarus, who passed away a few months ago, rest in peace. And as I mentioned once before, a long time ago, this album is your best way to get that song, Goodbye Horses. Original copies of that song by Q Lazarus go for astronomical amounts of money, and worth every penny. It's a classic. Just be aware this is the short version of the song. If you want the long version of Goodbye Horses by Q Lazarus, you can always pick up the Jay and Silent Bob reboot soundtrack that has the longer dance mix that you may be familiar with. Jonathan Demme loved that song so much he later used it in his own Silence of the Lambs. 3 years later. Anyway, in addition to Goodbye Horses, this is a really fun 80s album with a lot of interesting left turns. Speaking of left turns, the inimitable Sonny Rollins, Alfie. I spoke about Cat Stevens' music almost being like another character in Harold and Maude, or at least the sonic wallpaper. The same is true of Sonny Rollins in Alfie, this wonderful, albeit a bit dated, Michael Caine film from the 60s. This is my original mono promo copy, recorded by the great Rudy Van Gelder, and it sounds phenomenal, as most impulse pressings do. If you are just getting into jazz and you are unfamiliar with Alfie by Sonny Rollins, this soundtrack is my favorite thing Sonny Rollins ever did. Listen to Alfie's theme and tell me if you feel the same. Charade, Henry Mancini, or Charade if you're nasty. Henry Mancini is a mythic figure who has scored some of your favorite soundtracks, whether you realize it or not. This is one of my all-time favorite movies, and the opening title theme song, If I Close My Eyes, totally creates the same mood as watching the film. It's madcap, it's a little foreboding, and it's definitely off-kilter. That pretty much sums up the film, too. This pressing is on RCA Victor, and much like all of their stereo Dynagroove pressings, it sounds fantastic. As long as we're in a 60s vein, I've been listening to an awful lot of 60s soundtracks lately. If you've never seen the film Casino Royale, it's a bit of a mess, but it's one of those fascinating messes that only 60s cinema could provide. It stars David Niven, Peter Sellers, Ursula Andress. It's got dozens of cameos from people like Orson Welles, Woody Allen, William Holden. And as for the soundtrack, it may just be the one part of the film that worked the way it was supposed to. I love the opening theme by Herb Alpert and the Tijuana Brass, but the calling card for this album is Dusty Springfield singing The Look of Love. It totally sums up why you hire Burt Bacharach and his partner Hal David to do music for a film like this. It provides warmth to the entire soundtrack and the film itself. This album also used to be a very popular record for people to test their hi-fi equipment with, as it was very well engineered and mastered. And quite honestly, I don't know if album covers get much better. Up next, Rock and Roll High School. Thank you, Roger Corman, thank you, Alan Arkish, and thank you, Joe Dante, for this exploitation classic, the film of which is one of my favorite cinematic time capsules. And the soundtrack is a really rockin' mixtape. There are a ton of great Ramones songs on this album, and other songs on this album work just as well, such as So It Goes by Nick Lowe, School's Out by Alice Cooper, and Smokin' in the Boys' Room by Brownsville Station. A couple of tracks on this album are real head-scratchers, though, such as A Dream Goes On Forever by Todd Rundgren and Energy Fools the Magician by Eno. One of my favorite uses of music in this film is Come Back Johnny by Devo. The money shot, however, if you will excuse the expression, is a 5-song live medley by the Ramones. And I'm so glad that this era of the Ramones was captured with such pristine accuracy. Add on I Want You Around, one of my favorite Ramones songs ever, and you've got one hell of a great soundtrack. For the rest of this week's episode, please join my Patreon at patreon.com/popculturegraveyard, or click above for more free content.